Nothing stated by Steve Bartlett during the Fight Back with Steve show is intended to be legal advice, and appearing on the show does not create an attorney-client relationship with Steve Bartlett. Before taking legal action, it is advisable to consult with an attorney of your choice. The views and opinions expressed by the callers and guests of the Fight Back with Steve show are solely opinionated by those individuals and are not necessarily the expressions and viewpoints of Steve Bartlett or Talkwat Studios.
Hi, I'm Steve Bartlett, and welcome to Fight Back. This is my weekly show, which has now been bumped till 9 o'clock. So if you were trying to watch me at 8 o'clock and you missed me and you're here now, hey, big surprise. I'm glad that you're watching the show. Not only am I glad that you're watching the show, but I have some big news for you. This Friday night, there is an award banquet called the Talkie Awards, which goes out towards the best internet television and radio broadcasts throughout the Tampa Bay area. And this year, guess who is nominated for Best Legal or Political Show? Hint, you're watching them right now. Yes, the Fight Back with Steve show is actually nominated for the Talkie Award for Best Political or Legal Show. And I can't believe it. I'm really excited about that because of all the famous actors out there like Marlon Brando, Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, and Jack Nicholson, never nominated for a talkie. Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, never nominated for a talkie. Not only that, look at the great lawyers out there. Abraham Lincoln, Clarence Darrow, Johnny Cochran, F. Lee Bailey. None of them have ever been nominated for a talkie, but I'm nominated for a talkie. So I'm really happy and I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a big event. It's going to be really nice, and I'll let you know next week how it turns out. But anyway, what we're going to talk about tonight is about the war on women that's actually going on right now by the Republican administration. And when they're talking about the war on women, specifically what they're talking about is the attack on women's right to reproduce, or their right to choose not to reproduce, which is about abortion. So tonight, that's what we're going to be talking about. So Roe v. Wade has been under attack ever since it was decided back in the early 70s, and people don't realize how fragile the right of women to have safe legal abortions are right now in the United States. People think that this war has long been won by women, but right now, Republicans aren't only waging a war on women, they're actually winning. So what I want to do tonight on Fight Back is explore the history of abortion rights in the United States and in Florida, and let you know what I think is going to actually happen in the future, because it's kind of scary. So let me talk to you about how the right of abortion actually is, how it actually came to be, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, as everyone knows, there is the Constitution, and people have what they refer to as their constitutional rights, which some of them are actually included in the Bill of Rights. But there was a case in the 1960s called Griswold versus Connecticut, which stated that not all the rights that are listed in the Constitution encompass all the rights that people actually have. There's other rights as well. And one of the rights that Griswold said that people have is a right of privacy. And that this right of privacy, although it doesn't specifically say it in the Constitution, is a right that people have anyway, especially when it comes to what they do with their own body and how they want to control whether or not they want to be a parent or not. And it was about contraceptives. There was a law in Massachusetts which said that contraceptives were illegal. Was declared unconstitutional by Griswold. And then in the 70s came the famous case Roe versus Wade. And what happened is Roe versus Wade established that women have a fundamental right to have an abortion, which stems from that fundamental right of privacy. Now, what happened because of that? Well, under the law, if a person has a fundamental right, then the only way the government can restrict that right, whether it be the state government or the federal government or a local government, is if the state has something called a compelling interest to limit or regulate that right. Okay? So if the state has a compelling interest, they can regulate or limit that right if it's a fundamental right, and that's what Roe versus Wade actually stood for. So the question is there a compelling state interest in making abortion illegal? And what the Supreme Court did in Roe versus Wade is said that, well, there are some compelling state interests that arise during different times of a woman's pregnancy. During the first trimester, there are no compelling state interest. The fetus isn't viable yet. That means it can't survive outside of the womb, so there's no state interest in protecting the fetus. And the woman's health isn't in jeopardy if she has an abortion during the first 3 months of her pregnancy. So therefore, there's no state interest, no compelling state interest to trump a woman's right to privacy and her right to have an abortion. So therefore, during the first 3 months, government can't put any limits on a person's right to have an abortion. However, during the second trimester, a woman's health can be at stake, and therefore, during the second trimester, there is a compelling state interest for the state to protect the woman's health, so they can come up with regulatory rules about abortion in order to protect a woman's health. And during the final trimester, at this time, a baby is viable and can survive outside of the womb. So therefore, Roe versus Wade said that during this time, there is a compelling state interest to protect the life of a viable child, and therefore abortion can be made completely illegal during the last trimester. So that's what Roe versus Wade was about. That's what it said. It applies to all the states. Because it's a fundamental right, a state can't say a person doesn't have it. Just like a state can't say that slavery is allowed in their state. If it's a fundamental right, no states can make laws saying you can't do it. Just like you have a fundamental right to worship the God of your choice, the state of Florida can't say you can't worship Jesus if you want to, or you can't worship Muhammad or Buddha if you want to, because it's a fundamental right. If people have a freedom of speech, that happens in every state, regardless of what laws the state passes. You have that fundamental right to speech. And likewise, you have a fundamental right to privacy. You have a fundamental right to decide what you do with your own body and to control reproduction. You have a fundamental right to decide whether you want to have children or not. And only under Roe versus Wade did they say that that goes to abortion rights, and therefore the government cannot regulate it during the first trimester, can regulate it during the second trimester, but can outlaw it during the final trimester. So that's what the law was like in the 70s, and Reagan did his best to put people on the Supreme Court to try to get it to overturn Roe versus Wade. Now, what happened is the next big case, which is the current law of the land when it comes to abortion, is a case called Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which came out in 1992 during the, I think it was the Bush administration, or it might have been Clinton. I think it was Bush was still president at the time. And what happened in that case was they had a split decision. The judges didn't know what to do. There were three different opinions in that case. And what happened was the decision was a coalition of two of the types of opinion. And there were groups. 3 people agreed. 2 other people agreed with the outcome, but not the rationale. And then the rest of the judges, the other 3, dissented. Now, 2 of the judges, which were Harry Blackmun, who wrote Roe versus Wade, and John Paul Stevens, said, let's keep Roe exactly the way it is. There's still a fundamental right to have an abortion, and there has to be a compelling state interest before you can limit or regulate the abortion. That's what 2 of the members of the court said. 3 of the members of the court, which was Sandra Day O'Connor, Justice Kennedy, and Justice David Souter, said, well, you know what? We agree that there is a fundamental right to abortion. We agree with Blackmun and Stevens about that. But we disagree that the government has to show a compelling state interest before we can regulate it or make it illegal. What the government has to do instead is show that the regulation doesn't place an undue burden, that it doesn't place an undue burden on a woman's right to have an abortion. So the government can regulate abortions, and what they were arguing about at the time was about parental consent laws, whether or not you have to get parental consent before having an abortion. They said that as long as it doesn't put an undue burden on a person's right to have an abortion, the government can put restrictions and regulate. So in that particular case, what the outcome was is they can require children under the age of 18 to get parental consent before having an abortion. But if they're scared to go to their parents, they can always do something called a judicial bypass, which allows you to go to the court system and have the courts decide to allow you to have the abortion. So that's what the judicial bypass was. And the Supreme Court said that that type of scenario was allowed. There's not enough of an undue burden since this judicial bypass for people's right to have an abortion. But the Supreme Court flat out said that abortion is a fundamental right, that the right of privacy, if anything, is a right of the individual, married or single, to be free from unwarranted government intrusion into matters so fundamentally affecting a person as the decision as to whether or not to bear a child. What the Supreme Court in that case said, just to reiterate, is that there's no longer the strict scrutiny test where the government has to show a compelling interest before it can regulate. Now all the government would have to do is say, do the restrictions place an undue burden on the person's right to have an abortion? Well, there was also, besides those two opinions, the O'Connor, Kennedy, and Souter, who, although they changed Roe versus Wade and made it less strong for abortion rights, actually agreed to uphold the right of abortion. There were three dissenting opinions which were for overturning Roe versus Wade, which were done by Justice Rehnquist, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time, Justice Scalia, and Justice Thomas. Those three wanted to overturn Roe versus Wade. They said, the hell with precedent, we want to overturn it. And the reason they wanted to overturn it was because they claimed in the decision that they wrote that there is no all-encompassing right of privacy. That the reason why women can't have an abortion is that, the reason that women don't have a right to have an abortion is because they don't have a right of privacy. They claim that there is no tradition in the United States of women being able to have legal abortions. Therefore, the protections of liberty don't apply to the right to have privacy or the right to have an abortion. So those three were for totally overturning Roe versus Wade. Okay? So now let's get into the time machine and see where we are right now. Okay? So let's see what the status of the law is right now and why I'm saying that women's rights are being under attack and there's actually a war on women. Okay? What's been going on right now is that the Supreme Court has got a different type of people on the Supreme Court than there was before. Okay? And I'm going to be talking to you about the undue burdens that they've been placing on women right now and how states are trying to make it harder for women to have abortions. But right now we have a caller, I believe. I just saw we got a caller sign. Is there a caller on the line?
Yes, there is.
Yes, hi. This is Steve. Thanks for calling.
Hi, this is the Walrus from Palm Harbor.
Hey, how are you doing, Mr. Walrus? I haven't talked to you in a while.
Again, your liberal viewpoints disgust me. The Bible does not approve of abortions.
Well, the Bible doesn't approve of abortion, but there's nothing in the Bible which says that Jesus ever said anything against abortion.
One after another. More and more abortion clinics are closing. People don't want abortions to be available. Abortion is wrong. And here you go again defending it, citing the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was wrong. And as soon as Rand Paul becomes the Republican president, he will make sure that abortions will be legal once and for all.
That abortions are illegal. What should we do
correct.
with women who continue to have abortions after the law making them legal is repealed?
It will be repealed.
What should we do with these women? Should we put them in prison?
Or another Republican.
If a woman aborts her baby, should she get the death penalty?
Was a physician who did not think that abortion was right, and he condemned abortions.
What should we do with a woman who has an abortion? What should we do to her to punish her?
Well, she shouldn't have an abortion.
If she has one anyway, she breaks the law and has an abortion.
Go that far. It's the doctors and the politicians that should be punished.
And how should we punish the politicians and the doctors?
Women shouldn't have a say in the matter.
Women shouldn't have a say in the matter to do what they want with their own bodies?
Who should have the say. The politicians are the one that should set the standards for our nation.
Well, you know what? Right now, the Republicans actually are agreeing with you because that's what they're actually doing. State by state, the politicians are telling women and telling doctors what they should be doing. The same Republicans who are so outraged at Obama for calling it a socialized government takeover of people's health care have no problem mandating what doctors and women talk about and what doctors and women do concerning abortion.
Exactly. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Right now they're a bunch of states including Florida, are saying that there has to be ultrasounds. They're saying that there has to be ultrasounds. That a doctor has no medical. It doesn't help any. It has no medical purpose, but telling doctors that they must have their patients listen to the heartbeat of the baby, that they have to do ultrasounds and make the women who are already going through a very difficult personal choice have to actually watch it and to try to discourage the woman from having an abortion. That's the kind of things they're doing. And yet the Republicans are the ones who are saying, let's keep the government out of the doctor's offices, that the government should be involved in health care, yet they're mandating what doctors talk to women about. What's your opinion of that?
Woman would have an abortion if she heard the heartbeat of a child within her body, even if it was from a rapist. Once she heard that heartbeat, she would not.
Is there a second caller?
And that's why these.
Hey, Walrus, I got to let you go. We got another caller right now, but thanks for calling in. Is there a second caller? Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi. What's your name?
Nancy.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
I'm good. Abortion is a sin.
Well, I know that you think it's a sin, and that's what your faith tells you. And if that's what your faith tells you, you should not have an abortion. But do you believe people have a right to choose to sin or not?
Nobody should have an abortion.
Should people have a right to choose to sin or not?
No, nobody should take another life.
Should people have a right to choose to sin or choose to not to sin?
No.
Or didn't God give people free will to make those decisions themselves?
They should not murder.
I'm sorry?
Another life.
Okay, why do you think it's murder?
It's murder. It's taking
why do you think it's murder? Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that if a person is brain dead, that they should be taken off of the monitors, or should they be forced to be hooked up to machines?
They're not being forced. They're being allowed to live. You shouldn't have to fight for food and water.
But if people are completely brain dead, should they be taken off? Are they dead, or are they still alive if they're hooked up to machines?
How safe are those machines that tell us that they're brain dead if they're still breathing?
Okay, so you equate life with taking in breath and exhaling. Breathing is life, is being alive.
Yes. And babies breathe before they're born.
Okay, well, a fetus is not able to breathe on their own.
A baby breathes. It's a chemical reaction that happens while the baby is in the mother's womb.
Okay, well, fetuses aren't breathing. They're not taking in lungs. They're actually relying on the mother for oxygen to come in and carbon dioxide to go out. They're not breathing. They're similar to a person on a machine at the end of life.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Is that your reasoning for why abortion is okay?
No, abortion should be okay because it's a woman's right to decide what to do with her own body. It's a fundamental right, and religious beliefs, although I respect them, should be up to the person to decide, not for the government to decide. Science does not agree that just because a person has been conceived at conception that they're a human being. Science doesn't agree that it's a human being at this time. It's a question of faith. It's a question of religion. It's not a question of science yet, and therefore it should be up to the person to decide whether to have an abortion or not. It's imposing somebody else's religious views on somebody else.
That's not what I learned in my science class.
where did you go to school in science?
I'd rather not say.
Was it a Christian school?
That really doesn't matter.
Well, that's a problem. That should be another topic on a show about whether or not people who are going to private schools are getting a really strong scientific education. I mean, a lot of these schools aren't teaching things such as evolution, even though that's a scientific fact.
That's a whole nother subject.
Exactly.
You're trying to take the focus off of what I'm telling you.
Okay.
But I'll call back whenever you want to tackle evolution.
But I'm really glad you called. Thanks for listening. I respect your view. I disagree with it, but you have a right to feel the way you do. I know people are very passionate about this issue, and I'm just explaining what the law actually says about abortion, okay?
All right.
But thank you for calling.
Bye.
Okay. Well, what I was saying is that the different states are passing different laws restricting women's rights to have an abortion. And the question is, are these laws placing an undue burden on a woman's rights? Eventually, this is going to hit the Supreme Court. I mean, the facts that Arizona, Florida, Kansas, Texas, and a bunch of other states are forcing women to have ultrasounds. How is that? That's placing an undue burden on a woman. It's trying to persuade her not to have an abortion. In the state of South Dakota, doctors who perform abortions are not allowed to get malpractice insurance, discouraging people from actually taking up the profession by driving them out. All other doctors can get malpractice insurance, but not doctors who perform abortions. Is that placing an undue burden on people's right to have an abortion? In 26 states, 90% of the counties, in 26 states, there are no places that people can get abortions. It's becoming more difficult for people to be able to get abortions. In the state of Texas has mandated that that doctors, before they can perform abortion, have to have privileges to operate at particular hospitals, and 90% of the clinics for abortions have to be shut down because they don't meet these quote-unquote high standards. The whole purpose is to place an undue burden on people's right to have an abortion. 12 states require that a woman is to be given information on the ability of a fetus to feel pain. How does that have to do with medicine? It's not. It's to try to make women feel guilty about having an abortion. And yet, there's an argument that it doesn't place an undue burden on a woman's right to have an abortion. South Dakota requires patients obtain mandatory counseling from an anti-abortion crisis pregnancy center before a woman could have an abortion. Once again, that is placing an undue burden on a woman's right to choose. There was a case in the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals in which South Dakota allowed or forced doctors to give false or misleading information about suicide risks in women who have an abortion, saying that if you have an abortion, you're more likely to kill yourself. Forcing doctors that they have to tell that to women to discourage them from having an abortion, and yet the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that law as constitutional and said that it did not place an undue burden on a woman's right to choose. So the states are attacking the legal rights that were recognized in Roe versus Wade, and they're chipping away at it gradually. Now, one of these cases is going to go up to the Supreme Court. They're going to challenge it and say that it's gone too far, that it's placed an undue burden on a woman's right to choose. And this is where I'm scared to death. The reason why I'm scared to death is that right now, the Supreme Court has a very unique balance. There's 9 members of the Supreme Court. Of the members of the Supreme Court, 4 of them were appointed by Democrats, and that's Judge Ginsburg, Judge Kagan, Judge Sotomayor, and Judge Breyer. Those 4 are for protecting the right to have abortions, okay? 2 of the judges, Judge Scalia and Judge Thomas, are flat out for overturning Roe versus Wade. How do we know that? Because when Casey came out, that's how they voted before, and they're very open about how they're against abortion and they think it should be overturned because they don't recognize a right of privacy. Okay? So that's 4 for allowing women to have abortions, 2 for making it illegal. Okay? Then there's Judge Kennedy. Judge Kennedy is a very conservative judge who was appointed by, I think it was Reagan. I think it was Reagan who appointed Judge Kennedy. Now, Judge Kennedy is the person who voted in the coalition on Casey and said that women do have a right to have a fundamental right to abortion, but it's the undue burden standard. Okay, that's Judge Kennedy. That's what Judge Kennedy decided before. But there's no guarantee that Judge Kennedy will continue to hold that position. He may flip and go with the conservatives, with his buddies Scalia and Thomas, as opposed to taking that middle compromise ground that he had before 10 years ago or 20 years ago when Casey was established. But right now, let's keep him on the side of people having the right to have an abortion. That means 5 members of the Supreme Court are for a woman's right to choose, with the 5th member being a real swing vote and real being iffy. 2 who are definitely opposed. The other 2 members of the Supreme Court are Justice Roberts. He's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Roberts, when he used to work as a Solicitor General for President George Herbert Walker Bush, he actually wrote a brief to the Supreme Court saying that we continue to believe that Roe versus Wade was wrongfully decided and should be overturned. When he was confirmed to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he kind of weaseled on that and said, well, it's an established law, blah, 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 because he knew that if he said that he was for overturning Roe versus Wade, they wouldn't put him in the Supreme Court. But what he wrote back when he was a Solicitor General made it clear that he's for overturning Roe versus Wade, and he's an ultra-conservative appointed by Bush to be on the Supreme Court. So that is 3 people who are for overturning Roe versus Wade. Then there is Alito, who they call Mini Scalia. Whatever Scalia says, he agrees to. He actually said that he was for overturning Roe versus Wade back before he hit the Supreme Court as well. So right now, there are 4 people for upholding Roe versus Wade and 4 people for reversing Roe versus Wade. And Kennedy, who's in the middle, but so far has sided on protecting a woman's right to choose. However, that's not going to be the makeup of the Supreme Court forever. The oldest member of the Supreme Court is Justice Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg has had cancer. Justice Ginsburg, we thought, was going to die, and they've talked about her retiring at the end of this session. Okay? The next election, the Republicans want to make about Obamacare. Okay? Because they claim they don't want the government involved in your health care decisions, even though, as I pointed out earlier tonight, when it comes to abortion, they have no problem with big government telling a woman what they can and cannot do with their own bodies. Okay? Well, what happens is she could die, she could retire, which is one of the people who are probably the strongest defenders of a woman's right to choose. If the next president of the United States is a Republican, the Republicans are committed to appointing someone on the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. If Ginsburg is replaced with another person like Roberts or Alito or Thomas or Scalia, they would have a 5 majority and Roe versus Wade would cease to exist. Women would no longer have a fundamental right to have an abortion. Not only that, but the Supreme Court would say that people don't have a right to privacy. It extends even further than the right of a woman to have an abortion. They would strike down the right of privacy. That's where we're heading. They want people to get upset about Obamacare by spreading lies, by spreading statistics about it. But the truth of the matter is, getting rid of abortion will be the ultimate ability for the government to tell doctors and women what they can do. What do we do with these women who get pregnant against their will? What do we do with these babies? The government doesn't, the conservatives don't believe in helping these women financially. Once, when you're in the womb, they care about the baby. But once the baby's born, they don't care anymore. They don't care about feeding the baby with food stamps. They don't care about education. They don't care about giving assistance to women who are unwed mothers. No, they don't care about that. Oh, they only care about the fetus. Why? Because they know the religious right gets all up in arms, and that's the way they can get a lot of poor people to vote for them against their own economic interests by exploiting these views to try to help them get reelected so they can protect the rich. Now, this is a part of my show where I talk about Bartlett Blast Back, and here's my big blast back. We're just talking about Obamacare, okay? I just got Obamacare, okay? I just got it. And this is what it's going to do for me. It's supposed to be the worst thing in the world. For $400 a month, I now have coverage. I have not had coverage since the 90s because of pre-existing. I was unable to get coverage, okay? And because of that, if I have a stroke, if I have cancer, if I have a heart attack, I would have ended up in bankruptcy. I would have lost my home and everything that I own. But now, because the law says that they can no longer discriminate against me because of my pre-existing, I now have health insurance. And if I get sick under the new law, they can't kick me off anymore. There's a $1,500 out-of-pocket maximum payment. So if I have a stroke, or if I get cancer, or something else happens to me horribly, I don't end up losing everything I own and end up in bankruptcy. It's going to cost me $1,500. Thank you very much, Barack Obama, for getting me this coverage. Okay? Don't believe the people out there who say it's the worst thing in the world, that it's socialized medicine, that it's the government telling doctors what to do, or that it's the government telling patients what kind of treatment they can get. The real overstepping of the boundaries is when the government says to a woman that they cannot control their reproductive organs, that they must have a baby against their will. That is the government overstepping, and that is Big Brother at its worst. Okay? So what it's important to do is for you to not close your eyes to the problem. It's not right for you to ignore the problem or to give in and just jump on the bandwagon of all the people who are anti-Obama. What you need to do is you need to get out there and vote and make sure that Democrats are elected in the next election and that a Democrat is elected president, because only then can we guarantee that a woman's right to privacy and a woman's right to choose the right to have an abortion is secure. If Republicans get in there, there's going to be back alley abortions happening again. People are going to be put in jail who are women just because they want to choose not to have a baby. We're going to be going back to a horrible time in American history. Don't let them do that by scaring you about Obamacare. Thank you very much, and remember to fight back.